Well, greetings, everyone. Wonderful day it is so far. I think we're going to have a great day today. My lesson today is an experience I've had not too while back in regard on the driveway. Um, One of my cars got stuck off the side because it slid on some ice, and Karen slid her back end of her truck, her SUV, off the side of the driveway, and it was stuck in the snow and ice. And so I tried to, and I did, successfully pull it out with my pickup truck. And so I was going on a incline, going uphill, and it was kind of steep there. That's why she slid off. And I had to get my truck to pull it out. And so once I had to get my truck set on that uphill incline, then I had to put my brakes on. Well, I didn't trust my brakes by themselves, just putting it into parking gear, so I put on my emergency brakes. And so, from that experience, the title of our lesson today is Driving with Your Brakes On. And I'm going to finish that story, and you already know what I did by just the title, but I'll get to that in just a moment. I want to imagine a story, and I want you to think about it. I made up this story totally out of my head, so hope it fits well with you. But let's imagine there are two friends by the name of Mary and Sally, and they are visiting each other, and they're sitting on a front porch of one of their homes on a warm spring day, and they both have glasses of good old sweet Southern iced tea, and they're sitting there just talking as two friends would do. And in that conversation, they confess to one another that they really need to be more active, especially in springtime after the winter time of staying inside so much. And they decided to join a local YMCA and the aerobics class that they had there for more senior people and for women, and they could enjoy that. And they made a promise to each other they would be there and participate together as friends. Now, they didn't want to let each other down, and they both want to fulfill their commitments and their promises that they were going to try hard and they were going to be loyal to this aerobics class. Now, afterward, when they started going through this, Mary, when the aerobics class ends, Mary keeps her routine up, and Sally soon drifts off to eat more cake and ice cream and sweet tea on the front porch. Even though they accomplished the same thing, and a very astute third-party observer like us might have noticed a difference in how each woman went about their goal. It was definitely hard for both of them. And they both woke up at dawn, drank the water they needed to replenish their system, while others might be having in the prior time would have had a soda or a sweet cup of coffee and wherever it may be. And they did their aerobics until they both were sore and tired. And for Mary, this work felt like a battle against gravity all the time, although a worthy battle. And for Sally, the change seemed strangely freeing to her. Now, Mary saw her efforts as the price she had to pay for the reward she wanted, which is a healthier body. She wanted to look and feel better, so she had to pay for that in the form of increased exercise, boring drinking water mostly, and early morning wake-ups when she loved to sleep in. Now, Sally was just as disciplined as Mary, doing all the agreed aerobic moves, but she was always looking forward to the end of each workout and felt deprived at the taste of a sweet tea, but it was okay. Now, Mary had a little different attitude, and it led to a different experience of the whole thing. She didn't see the exercises in plain water in early mornings as a constraint imposed on her by the agreement. That was past. But rather, it was a way of a living that has always been available to her, which she was now adopting voluntarily. So Mary looked forward to this event, and she religiously stayed after it. She didn't groan about being more flexible day to her, that she could do something else, or telling herself that she can't have the sweet tea right now. She didn't go into that. She knew that she wasn't bound to those sacrifices but rather she was choosing them because they're better for her. She didn't have to fight with herself about how much effort was good enough because she saw that the reward and the sacrifice was inextricable together. If she wanted one, she must want the other because they only ever showed up as one thing. She had to get up, she had to do what she had to do, and she had to sacrifice whatever it may be, but what she got out of it, that's what she wanted. And so she loved the whole process. Now I'm telling you how difference between Sally and Mary perspective here. Sally stopped doing it and just winged back off after she finished her promise with Mary. And she got right back to her routine because she just didn't want to get up anymore in this kind of approach. Now I'm telling you this story not to make you feel guilty about yet lifestyle that you have or to have a better exercise program. It's not the point. And also, if your name is Sally or Mary, or by nickname by that, it isn't about you. It's just an accident. Trust me. It's just a couple I named in my head. But the story tells an insight parallel to our spiritual journey. You know, I always thought about that wonderful story we've heard a million times about Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve. And the lesson was pretty basic. There was a lazy brother and a hardworking brother. You should be the hardworking brother, or else you'll miss out on the deeper rewards of life. And then you could become possibly resentful and treacherous in your deeds. Well, let's look at Genesis 4, the 3rd verse and on. And let me read it to you. At the designated time, Cain brought some of the fruit of the ground for an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought some of the firstborn of his flock, even the fattest of them. And the Lord was pleased with Abel and his offering, but with Cain and his offering he was not pleased. So Cain became very angry, and his expression was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why is your expression downcast? Is it not true that if you do what is right, you will be fine? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. It desires to dominate you, but you must subdue it." Now, the difference between them, Cain and Abel, is much more subtle than that. Both brothers worked hard and both understood that doing so was necessary to assess a better life, like aerobics. But Abel, let's say Mary, makes his sacrifice wholeheartedly, without complaint. However, Cain, or Sally, gets mad at God immediately when his sacrifices don't pay off, revealing that he resents the work, but he covets the pay. Like many of us, he regards the reward and its price as separate things. The work is an obstacle to the thing that he values, rather than part of it as one piece, much like we talked about Mary. I realize that I tend to take the Cain approach. I'm always trying to sacrifice just enough to get the reward, just to do the minimum. And I get mad at the world or how things are when that doesn't work out that way. I mean, I stop eating candy bars, for example, or cake, whatever. And because I stopped eating that sweet stuff, I expect the pounds to just fall off my body overnight. And when it doesn't do that, I'm disappointed. I get frustrated. It's sort of like I'm always holding something back within me to be able to understand that it takes sacrifice. It takes a little more of a pointed way of saying, I want to lose weight, so I know it's going to take time, so I might as well enjoy the journey of it and feel good about myself. In that famous Cain and Abel scene, it shares a discovery about how not to drive with your brakes on. In studying the Cain and Abel story closely, down to each word, in various translations, He says that in Eastern English versions, Cain is told to form the form of thou shalt rule over sin. In other words, you must do it or you will do it to do the right thing. You have to do it. And that's a command of the kind that we give ourselves when we resolve to work out 3 days a week, stop eating junk food, or go to bed by 10 o'clock at night. You will do this thing. You will do it because you know you need to do it. That's how it's going to be. You hear me? Ray, you hear me? In other ways, don't argue with me. Just get out of bed. Go to sleep when you're supposed to. Put that candy bar down. It's that kind of a command that we tell ourselves sometimes. We don't have to like it, so we get mad at ourselves and kind of be more assertive. Now, whether or not these sorts of accomplishments, do motivate us to act, it doesn't really work out in the long run. Work done this way never frees us. It's an obligation. It's a burden. It makes life feel like a kind of a grinding between opposing forces. It isn't a way you'd want to live if you had a choice. Essentially, I suggest there is a choice. The original Hebrew word in the passage, if you look at it, is called timshel. It doesn't mean that you must, but rather it says you may. A different translation. Now, this changes the proposition entirely. God isn't telling Cain what he must do, but what he may do. You may triumph over temptation. You may sacrifice wholeheartedly without inner conflict. It's not a command. It's good news. You can. You may be Cain or Abel. You can be. Your choice. And this possibility exists in every moment. And its greatest gift that we ever had as human beings is to have this choice, not the demand on our life, like Mary and like Sally, if you think about it. So for whatever reason, our friend Mary got this on her level. She didn't regard the aerobic workout regime as a obstacle that she had to get past to get a desirable thing in return. You must. She saw it as an entire path, the whole thing, way of living, that she could embrace or reject. May. The new regiment seemed to her to be a better path than the one she was on, so she took it, and life, or God if you prefer, showed her beyond doubt that she was right. Let me ask you a question. Are you Cain or are you Abel? Or maybe even another way of putting it. Are you Mary or are you Sally in your approach to life? Have you ever tried to drive your brakes on? Well, as I described earlier, I have. And it wasn't easy. When I was on that incline, that driveway, I decided when I got back in the car to start pulling on it after I pulled Karen's car out, that I'll get back in and drive forward again and go back up to the garage up at the top of the hill. And I put it in drive. But I don't use the parking brake that often, and I did not take it off. And all of a sudden, that thing is jumping, and it's not going very hard at all. And I'm going, what is going on? And then it dawned on me. I was driving with my brakes on. Possibly that is what Cain was doing in his sacrifice. He was sacrificing with his parking brake on. His service was a lot like Sally in our story. She too had her parking brake on, doing what exercises, but not wholeheartedly. She was doing it with reluctance, with the brakes on. She was just trying to force herself, but her heart wasn't in it. In Ephesians 6:7, it tells us this: serve wholeheartedly, as if you were serving the Lord, not people. Ooh, that's powerful. I'm going to read it again to you. Serve wholeheartedly, as if you were serving the Lord, not people. Oh, I want you to think about that if you can. If nothing else, recite that with yourself all week long. Serve wholeheartedly. What does that mean? That's our calling as Christians. We are called to serve, not get. So I have a question for you today. If you are a Christian, what specifically are you doing to serve the Lord wholeheartedly, with all of your heart and your soul? Frank Lloyd Wright, the great architect, said this: you have to go wholeheartedly into anything in order to achieve anything worth having. I like that. Are some of you struggling to answer that question I asked you? Now, maybe we're struggling a bit because we live in a society where we pay people to serve the United States. The clerk at the store, the waitress and cooks at the restaurant, the mailman, the landscaper, the repairman, the teacher who teaches our children or grandchildren. Yes, as a soldier, even our military are paid to serve us. In fact, it's often easier for us to pay someone to do something we don't want to do, because at some point we decide that we can't or won't do that something somebody did for us. We want somebody to be our extension. Remind me of the old tongue twister shared by many a teacher. Let me read it to you. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Now, somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. Ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Now say that 3 times. Nobody did what anybody could have done. Nobody did what anybody could have done. Nobody did what anybody could have done. Well, that's hard. I think Jesus faced that kind of problem and frustration with his disciples. Just not getting it, he told them, when it came to serving others. So he decided to teach them a dramatic lesson about serving others wholeheartedly. Instead of just telling them, he showed them. In John 13:3, it reads this: Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Then we skip forward to the 12th verse. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and resumed to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so. And for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and Master and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. In 1972, NASA launched the exploratory space probe Pioneer 10. And according to Leon Jarrett in an article in Time that I kept, the satellite's primary mission was to reach Jupiter, photograph the planet and its moons, and beam data to Earth about Jupiter's magnetic field, radiation belts, and atmosphere, and things like that. Well, scientists regarded this as a very bold plan, for at that time, no Earth satellite had ever probed beyond Mars. And they feared that the asteroid belt would destroy the satellite before it even reaches target. You know, that goes around that. But Pioneer 10 accomplished its mission and much, much more. Swinging past the giant planet on November 1973, Jupiter's immense gravity hurled Pioneer 10 at a higher rate of speed toward the edge of the solar system. At 1 billion miles from the sun, Pioneer 10 passed Saturn. And at some 2 billion miles, it hurtled past Uranus, Neptune at nearly 3 billion miles, and Pluto at almost 4 billion miles. So by 1997, 25 years after launch, Pioneer 10 was more than 6 billion miles from the sun. That's a long distance. And despite that immense distance, Pioneer 10 continued to beam back radio signals to scientists on Earth. And Jareth, the article writer, says this: perhaps most remarkable, those signals emanate from an 8-watt transmitter which radiates about as much power as a bedroom nightlight and takes more than 9 hours to reach Earth. So the little satellite that could not qualify to do what it was told or it was supposed to do, engineers designed Pioneer 10 with a useful life just for 3 years, but it keeps on going and going. By simple longevity, the tiny 8-watt transistor radio accomplished more than anyone thought possible. That's what Jesus was talking about in washing their feet, to do it wholeheartedly and to do it with everything you have. You know, all Jochebed had as a mother of Moses was some straw, but she wove it into a basket to shelter Moses. So what do you have in your hand? All David had was a slingshot and some smooth stone, but in God's hand, it brought down a giant. All the widow had was enough food for one more little small meal for her and her son. But God used it to feed her family and the prophet Elijah throughout a famine. It just kept on multiplying. So what do you have in your hand? A little boy had a sack lunch of fish and bread, but Jesus used it to feed more than 5,000 people. So what do you have in your hand? All the widow had in her hand was 2 small coins, but Jesus said it was worth more than the bags of gold offered by the widow. What do you have in your hand? John Wesley tells us this: one of the principal rules of religion is to lose no occasion of serving God. And since he is invisible to our eyes, we are to serve him in our neighbor, which he receives as if done to himself in person, standing visibly before us. It goes back to our Ephesians lesson earlier. We all have something God has given us that we can use to service to him. When Moses finally agreed to head back to Egypt and speak to God, the Bible says in Exodus, so Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt, and he took the staff of God in his hand. But it was no longer a staff. He went to Egypt to do God's work, and with a promise of God's provision, with God's tools, which was that staff. I like this poem by Rilla Dunn, a great author. She said, I am the place where God shines through, for he and I are one, not two. I need not fret, nor fear his plan. He wants me where I am as I am. And if I am relaxed and free, he'll carry out his plan through me. Isn't that pretty? Well, Norman Vincent Peale, in our conclusion here, had a great quote as well. I like what he said. When you wholeheartedly adopt a with all your heart attitude and go all out with a positive principle, you can do incredible things. Incredible things, wholeheartedly. Sir Christopher Wren, a famous architect, was making a beautiful cathedral in London. Beautiful. And a journalist thought it'd be really kind of neat, interesting to interview some of the workers that he chose, 3 at random, and ask them this one question. What are you doing? Well, the first man replied, I'm cutting stone for 10 shillings a day. The next one answered, I'm putting in 10 hours a day on this job. But the third one said, I'm helping Sir Christopher Wren construct one of London's greatest cathedrals. Now, the worker knows about being wholehearted in his work. He sees. He wants to be part of something great. So whatever we do for our loving God, we need to do it not only because it's our duty or need to, but because our Lord and Master deserves it and our love demands it to give everything to him with all of our heart and soul. The master was searching for a vessel to use. On the shelf there were many. Which one would he choose? Take me, cried the gold one. I'm shiny and bright. I'm of great value, and I do things just right. My beauty and luster will outshine the rest, and for someone like you, master, gold would be the best. Unheeding, the master passed on to the brass. It was wide-mouthed and shallow, and polished like glass. Here, here, cried the vessel, I know what I will do. Place me on your table for all men to view. And that's what we're talking about. It's not about how shiny and how many gifts we have and who can sing or who's not shy, or it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what we can do, that we want to do, because we earnestly want to serve a loving God that loves us so much, and we love him so much in our hearts, that we want to just do everything, whatever we can do it with everything we have, with our heart and soul, because that's what he deserves. And we honor him, and we are blessed just by doing that. So take this week to not necessarily in a physical sense to wash another's feet, or to just be able to reach out with someone in some way, and with your whole heart, with prayers to God, that you do it at the right time, at the right moment for him. Reach out with your heart, wholeheartedly, and serve him with everything you do this week. May the Lord bless you. And don't forget to take those brakes off before you start driving. God bless.